Hello, everybody, and we're live for the first time. Today we're just going to be talking a little bit about the Sony A7S III and the FX6. It's my first stream, so let me know if you can hear me okay. I'm recording on the Rode VideoMic NTG here. Just mention in the comments if the volume's okay. So basically 2020 has been a really exciting year for cameras. We've had the C300 Mark III, we've had the Canon C70, and now we've got the FX6 and the A7S III out as well. So it's basically just a really exciting time for cameras. And I just wanted to go through kind of where the FX6 and the A7S III sit in the Sony lineup and who they might be for. So if you're just joining us, drop your name in the comments and let us know where you're from. And I'll read them out. Volume is good. Thank you, Mr. Bandsman. Okay, so this is the way I see it. Basically, Canon and Sony have basically done a similar thing. So the Canons have got the C300 Mark III and the C70, and they have the same sensor with largely the same specs, but just a different body, and you get the XLR inputs on the C300 Mark III, and also the ND filters, things like that you get with the cinema camera. And basically they're saying that you can either get the C300 Mark III or the C70, and you're not really limited by specs. It's just a case of usability, handling, and the inputs you get, such as XLR. I think it's got SDI in there as well. Then on the Sony side, they're doing a similar thing. So basically you've got the A7S III, which I'm filming on now. And then you've got the FX6 on the larger side, which is basically kind of all the specs on the A7S III crammed into a cinema body, which is amazing. And they've also added in great things like a variable ND filter, so you can kind of control that exposure, moving from light to dark scenes if you're outside, going inside, things like that, transitioning between scenes with different exposure. That's really handy, and definitely something I wish the A7S III had, but on a stills body it just wouldn't be possible to fit an ND filter behind that. It's just not possible. Just laws of physics prevent it. So the FX6 is definitely looking very tempting for me as a next camera, but I can't quite afford it yet. So I'm happy with the A7S III. So James Haddock from Bristol, hi, how you doing? Rowan Weil has asked, is the FX6 as good in low light as the A7S III? So at the moment it's all speculative because I haven't tried out the FX6. It's still on pre-order, but on the early tests that I've seen, it basically has the same ISO performance as the A7S III, but something to do with the processing they're using on the FX6, whether that's a better processor, means that it's cleaning up the footage a little bit more. And it doesn't look like it's kind of, from the tests I've seen, it hasn't got that kind of mushy noise reduction look. It looks quite nice. So something about the processing on the FX6 just means that it looks a lot cleaner, even if the ISO performance is largely the same as the A7S III. So yeah, a very tempting camera. And like I said, 2020 has been a mad year. And if the world wasn't where it is at the moment, it would be very exciting for us. But at the moment, I'm a freelance videographer and filmmaker, and money is very short at the moment. So I bought the A7S III and I'm very happy with that. But for new filmmakers, for new videographers who are looking for a new camera, I think there's a lot of great choices, like whether it's Blackmagic, Canon, Panasonic, Sony. They've got choices at the low end, the high end, and the mid end, and they're not really limited by specs. So like I said, Sony and Panasonic are doing a great thing with the C300 Mark III and the C70 on the Canon side, and then the FX6 and the A7S III on the Sony side, where they're kind of giving them the same specs, but just saying, okay, with this cinema camera, you get the XLR inputs, you get the SDI inputs, and the ND filter, and kind of the handling of a cinema camera. So I think that's really interesting. And I think Blackmagic kind of pioneered that in some ways with the Blackmagic Pocket 4K and 6K. They gave you XLR inputs, albeit mini XLR. They gave you like a really nice filmic look out of those two cameras, and also at a crazy price. I think the Pocket 4K is just over $1,000, £1,000, and the 6K I think is 2,500. But either way, those cameras look amazing. I think actually on pure image quality, I actually prefer some of the sample footage I've seen from the Pocket 4K and the Pocket 6K. If you're looking at usability, autofocus, handling, and general kind of, yeah, just usability, I think the A7S III has it beat. just because it has that usable autofocus. I recently did a client job when I was shooting with a mother and a family. It was for like a lifestyle shoot, and basically we had an interview talking headshot, and we used the A7S III for that. And then we also had some B-roll shots of kind of the family in their home, and I think I used autofocus on 90% of the B-roll, just because of that eye tracking autofocus is just incredible. Like the same on the Canon cameras, like their autofocus is very good as well. But coming from before, I was on a Panasonic camera, and the autofocus is almost non-existent. So having that camera with that solid eye autofocus that Sony has and Canon also has, but I haven't experienced that, and just being able to trust that autofocus. So shooting people in B-roll sequences, the Sony autofocus is just second to none, basically. Before, I would have had to pull focus, and quite a lot of these lenses are focused by wire, which means they don't have a proper manual focus ring, which means you can't kind of repeat your focus pulls, and kind of they've got kind of that acceleration on the focus ring, which I'm not a fan of, unless you get something like a Sigma 18 to 35, which does have that kind of manual focus ring. But generally, when you're trying to pull focus with a lot of these modern electronic lenses, it's just a nightmare. So being able to have an autofocus that you can trust is just incredible, and I've really enjoyed it. Rowan said, Blackmagic footage is lush, but for run and gun shoots, autofocus and full frame and better battery is so helpful. That's very true. It's good to see that the autofocus of the A7S III going into the cine range, definitely. Although I think there's a limitation on the FX6 with regards to the A7S III. So the FX6 doesn't allow you to have touch tracking, which is really weird. So it has kind of like you can touch to set your focus point, but you can't set touch tracking in the same way as you can the A7S III. So I think that's a bit of a limitation. In terms of Blackmagic footage, yeah, I agree. I haven't actually shot with the camera. I've used an Ursa, but I haven't used the Pocket 4K. But yeah, the footage is amazing. It looks like a film camera almost. It almost looks like, because I use, obviously this is straight out of camera, so I haven't got any LUTs or anything on this, but I usually use Film Convert Nitrate on my footage, just because, for those who don't know, it's basically a film emulation software. So you can kind of put a Fuji look or kind of like those old film stock look on there with film grain, and I really like the way that kind of takes the digital edge off the cameras that I use. But the Blackmagic also almost looks as like it's got kind of like a film emulation already baked in, which is really nice. But yeah, I think the main thing with the Blackmagic is the lack of the autofocus. But if you're using it in like a controlled environment, like a short film or commercial, like you're going to be using manual focus anyway, so I don't think it's an issue. But yeah, Blackmagic, I would like to get a Pocket 4K in the future, possibly, just for those kind of controlled environments, just because the way it looks is incredible. Having said that, I think the A7S III with S-Log 3 is quite malleable in the grade, so you can kind of push it around whichever way you want. You still will get that slight digital look. I've had a play with S-Log 3, S-Log 2, HLG, and picture profile off, which is what I'm filming this on right now. And yeah, I still get that slight digital look, but I think if you add some film grain to it, then it kind of cleans up nicely. Yeah, we've got 6 people watching at the moment. Drop a like on the stream and share it with your friends so they can find this, and we can get more people discussing the cameras. Basically, what I want this to be is a regular kind of discussion in the community, because, you know, I like doing the videos where I record them, I edit them, I upload them and everything like that, and getting them polished. But it's nice to have something a bit more organic where we can kind of talk to each other and kind of share comments, share experience, and share advice, because, you know, we all know what it's like being a new filmmaker or videographer. It can seem really kind of crazy, and there's so many things to learn. So I think having these kind of community interactions where everybody can learn and grow with each other is really good. Rowan said, how are you finding your workflow with nitrate on the A7S III? They haven't released a camera profile for the A7S. They haven't released a camera profile for the A7S III, have they? Yes, they have. Yeah, I'm using the Film Convert Nitrate profile on there, so they have released it. Just check on their website, because it's not auto updates. You have to download the different packs there individually. But yeah, they've got one for the A7S III. Oh no, you're right. Sorry, they haven't got one on the A7S III. I'm actually using the profile from the FX9. So I'm using the S-Log and the S-Cinetone, depending on which profile, um, on the FX9 profile, just because I find that that gets the results I'm looking for. So I think the look is similar to the FX9. So in terms of its full frame with that Sony color science. So yeah, film convert nitrate. I'm using the FX9 pack at the moment. I really hope they release an A7S III pack soon. Fingers crossed. Rowan says, also, is that the video mic NTG you're speaking into? Yes, it is. How does it sound? I'm not monitoring the audio, so you'll have to let me know if it sounds okay. But yeah, generally this mic, I love it. It's running by USB at the moment into the laptop. So it's basically like a USB mic, but you can also use it as like a camera mic, obviously. I've used this boomed over people for interviews. I've used it for my YouTube stuff. It's really great. I have a bigger NTG 4 Plus, which I use on a lot of client stuff. But for kind of quick YouTube stuff, this is just, it's incredible. Like it's such a great mic and it's tiny. Like when you take the foam filter off, it's so small, it's tiny. Beautiful mic. Thanks, Rowan. Rowan says it sounds great. Yeah, so drop your questions below if you have any more questions, and if not, let's plow on and talk about the FX6 versus the A7S III. So basically, my thoughts are that, you know, if you want that cinema camera, if you want those kind of XLR inputs, those SDI inputs, the side handle, the top handle, then the FX6 is really appealing. For me personally, I think I would still stick with the A7S III just for my workflow. It's quite useful. You know, it's so small, you just sling it in your bag, stick a Ninja 5 on there, stick a mic on there, and you're good to go, basically. It's a great run and gun camera. I think the FX6 would appeal to me more if I was doing more kind of studio shooting and more controlled stuff where you have more time to set up lights and cameras and all the things like that. Then probably the FX6 would appeal to me more. But I think the A7S III I'm really happy with at the moment, and it's actually the fact that it's cheaper than the FX6 is a big thing to think about as well. You know, you could get an A7S III and you get a lens and some memory cards for the price of the FX6. So I think that's important to consider as well. Rowan, you're very active in the comments. Let me just catch up. What is your opinion in the main advantage of the FX6 over the A7S III? So I've talked about why I prefer the A7S III. And Rowan says, is the color science the same on both cameras? I don't think it's quite the same. If you saw Potato Jet did a comparison between the FX6 and the A7S III, and I think the A7S III had slightly yellower skin tones, and the FX6 was more magenta. But he actually commented that actually when he looked at the vector scope, the A7S III was more honest, so it was lining up with the skin tone line on the vector scope. So that's something to consider. I think the color science is close. So if you were shooting in S-Log, then I think, and you had a color chart, then you know it'll be quite easy to match them. So yeah, in terms of the advantage of the FX6 over the A7S III, I think, yeah, just those XLR inputs. When you're doing interviews, that's a massive thing. Like at the moment, I record on a H5 and I sync the audio in post, but having those XLRs on there, incredible. So that is a big plus. But the main thing for me, the FX6 over the A7S III, is that variable ND. Having that is just amazing. Like I've used cameras such as the C200 with the fixed ND in stops, so 2 to 10 stops of ND on it. But the FX6 borrows the variable ND from the FX9. So you can kind of just dial in those small increments of exposure, just so you can get kind of like, you know, if you're shooting at f1.4, and if you had like an ND system that went in hard stops and you were already at 10 stops of ND and you wanted to just bring it down a little bit, you have to go down to 8. So having that variable ND is just amazing, being able to kind of dial in that exact exposure change that you want. So I think those two things, the XLRs, the handling, three things, sorry, the XLRs, handling, and the variable ND are what makes the FX6 just a lot more appealing than the A7S III for some people. But like I said, for my use case, I think the A7S III is perfect. Rowan, you're commenting a lot again. Give me time to catch up. Such irony is the DSLR versus Cineworld. Yeah, I know, I know. We've basically got the same specs now, but we've just got a choice of kind of what inputs and what handling you want. So it's quite an interesting place to be. Rowan, you said about the magenta skin tones. Yeah. So you'll get that on any camera. Basically, I was matching an A7 III and an A7S III the other day, and like I said, the A7 III's got those famous kind of magenta skin tones, and the A7S III is slightly less, but it's still there. But yeah, basically, whenever I'm matching cameras, I always put a color chart in front of my talent, and that means that you can kind of get that perfect exposure. Any more questions in the comments? Let me know what you want me to talk about. I'm just going to take a sip. And has anybody pre-ordered the FX6 yet? Because I've just seen that the pre-orders have gone live, and I think is it $6,000 or £6,000, which I think for the specs you're getting is pretty decent. I think the C70 is close to that. It might be a few £100 or dollars in it, but I think the two cameras are competing quite well on price and features. So basically, I think, whether you're going for Canon or Sony, I think you're spoiled for choice this year. You've got a number of great cameras, whether you want a smaller point and shoot style body or you want kind of like a higher end cinema body. You really can't go wrong with Canon or Sony or Blackmagic for that matter. Like they've just got so many good options. uh Arno Populars, let me know if I pronounced that right. Thoughts on the FX6 versus the FX9 versus the A7S III? Yeah, so I've gone over the FX6 versus the FS9. Sorry, so many X's and S's. The FX6 versus the A7S III. So I've gone over that a little bit, and we just talked about basically it's a matter of whether you want those XLR inputs, whether you want that variable ND, whether you want that handling and kind of everything that comes with a cinema camera, or whether you want that kind of compact body on the A7S III. When it comes to the FX9, which is the higher end version, then it's a bit more difficult now. I think the FX6 has kind of made the FX9 a little bit redundant. With the FX9, you do get the 6K image, which is downsampled to 4K, but it's a lot bigger, it's a lot more expensive, and it can't do 4K 120 at the moment. I understand it's coming in a firmware update, but I think if I bought an FX9 a year ago or whenever it came out, and now they've released the FX6, I'd be pretty annoyed because you're getting basically better features, but for a cheaper price, which is the same for the C70. I think that's going to be the way that camera companies move now. So rather than kind of getting cameras that differentiate from each other on specs, you're going to get cameras that are kind of largely the same specs across the range, give or take, but they kind of vary in the number of inputs they have, the size, and the handling of the cameras, basically. So whichever camera you get a decent spec. You get your 4K 120, you get kind of raw output, which the FX6 has. The FX9 doesn't. You need to get an extra brick, like an extra add-on bit that adds onto the back of the FX9 to enable RAW out of that, which is, I think it's about $2,000, £2,000 extra just to get RAW out of that camera. Whereas the FX6 and the A7S III both offer RAW output via HDMI to the Ninja 5. So I think the FX9 now just seems a bit overpriced. Whether they can kind of bolster its features in a firmware update, I'm not sure. But yeah, at the moment, I think the FX9 is quite a difficult proposition for someone that's looking for a cinema camera. I think the FX6 is the way to go. The FX9, overpriced, and the features aren't really there. Maybe they can change that in a firmware. Any questions in the comments? Let me know. If you're just joining, please like the stream and make sure you share it with your friends, share it on Facebook, share it on Twitter, and get a few more people watching so we can have a discussion. Yeah, so in terms of what's coming next for Sony, I think I've seen rumors that they're going to announce the A7 IV soon. A7 IV, yeah, the A7 IV soon, which is rumored to have 6K. Was it 5K? No, 8K, sorry. The A7 IV is going to have 8K in 30 frames per second, so that's very appealing, and it's supposed to be out early next year. I think it's going to compete with the R5, but maybe if they can not make it overheat, which they've done with the A7S III, then it's going to be a really great proposition for Sony buyers. Yeah, any other questions in the comments? Let me know what you want to ask. Have you got an A7S III? Have you got an FX6 on pre-order? Any FX9 owners there that like to kind of set the record straight about, what the camera can offer to new users in 2020? Yeah, so I think the FX6, I think it's an amazing camera for a number of reasons, but I think new people that are going into the Sony system are going to have to ask themselves, do they want to spend that extra money on the FX6 when they could just, save £1,000 or dollars and get the A7S III and get a lens with it, get some cards with it, even get a Ninja 5 with it, which I think pairs really nicely. So is it worth that extra money for the FX6 over the A7S III? I'm not sure. For me personally, the A7S III is perfect, but I mean, if you want that cinema camera look, then yeah, the FX6, great option. Anna says, I own an FX9, but with a V-mount battery just to get some weight on it for handheld. Yeah, is the FX9 quite heavy? Because I haven't handled it myself. Is it quite heavy without the V-mount, with just the NPF batteries on there, or do you need that V-mount battery to stabilize it? Because it doesn't have. Does it have digital stabilization? I don't think it does. Let me know in the comments. And Arno says, I'm afraid that the FX6 is just too light for handheld without the IBIS. Yeah, so that's another thing that you get with a smaller camera. It's not going to have that. Basically, for anyone that doesn't know, if you're shooting handheld, you want to have as much weight as possible on the camera, just because it helps you kind of stabilize and takes out those micro jitters. So whenever I'm using the A7S III, I'm putting a Ninja 5 on it with an MPF battery on the back and like a side handle with a cage and a microphone, which adds a nice bit of weight to it. But yeah, if you're shooting with a cinema camera, you want it to be, especially without IBIS, you want it to be kind of have a nice weight to it, so you don't get those micro jitters. So yeah, I can see how adding a V-mount battery on there would really help. So good shout, Arno. Rowan says, fair point on the IBIS. Yeah, I think they did say that kind of IBIS on a cinema camera with an ND filter just wasn't possible. They just couldn't fit, the IBIS system behind the ND filter. So I think that's actually a limitation with cinema cameras. Like with stills cameras, or like cameras in a stills body like the A7S III, they've got a lot of space and they haven't got that ND filter, so they can afford to have that space to let the sensor move around. Whereas like with a cinema camera, they just can't do both. So you can have the variable ND, you can have the ND filters, but you can't have the IBIS with that. So it's kind of that trade-off. Do you want that IBIS, or do you want that variable ND? Having shot on the C200 prior to the A7S III, I think having an ND in camera is amazing, and I do actually miss that. But I think in the balance, the A7S III is better for my use case. Rowan says, I would rather have IBIS over an inbuilt ND. Interesting. Why is that, Rowan? I'm guessing because it stabilizes those handheld shots. That's what I find really useful. And actually with the A7S III, it's amazing how good the stabilization is. You've got the standard stabilization, but then you've got the active, where it basically crops in on the sensor and allows that IBIS a little bit more room to move. So having the active stabilization, the A7S III, really kind of, it reminds me of the GH5, the stabilization they have there, where they kind of have dual IS. So for handheld shooting on the GH5, it's amazing. Like it almost looks like you're on a gimbal sometimes. I think the A7S III with that active stabilization actually really helps smooth out those handheld shots. So great. Rowan says, you can put a Polar Pro, variable ND and step-up rings on there. You can't get the equivalent for IBIS unless it's a gimbal. That's true. Yeah, you can put variable ND on there, but it's an extra thing to kind of fiddle around with on the front of the lens, which is why I think in the balance, if you can have it, I think it's worth it. But I hear what you're saying, definitely. But I think, yeah, I've just got used to the fact that I'm going to have to use the variable ND on the A7S III, and I'm okay with that. I do miss the the ND filter on the C200 or like a cinema camera. So but that's just not possible. Like we said, you can have one or the other. You can't have both, unfortunately. Maybe in the future someone will bring out a cinema camera with IBIS, but I'm not sure. Interestingly, on the FX6, it does have the feature where it records the gyro data. So it has a gyroscope inside the FX6, and you can actually take it into Sony software called Catalyst Browse, which actually allows you to kind of it uses the gyro data to help stabilize the footage in post. It's an extra step, so it's not quite as it's not as good as having a built-in IBIS or even a digital stabilization. But I've seen some of the results of the A7S III and the FX6 stabilized using Catalyst Browse, the Sony software, and it looks quite impressive for software stabilization. Definitely better than warp stabilization or kind of the built-in stabilization in Resolve or Final Cut. Definitely. Random one. What is your process on grading S-Log3 footage? You match levels and then use nitrate? Yeah. So when I'm using S-Log3, I've tried a variety of different things. So I've tried the official Sony LUT, just dropping the Sony LUT on the S-Log3 footage just to see how that looks. It gets you in the ballpark, but I don't like how much sharpening and contrast it adds to the footage. So personally, like when I've used S-Log, I prefer to grade it manually. So add the contrast and saturation myself, add like a cinematic S-curve. So kind of bring down those shadows and lift those highlights slightly. But yeah, I think the Sony LUT adds in a bit too much sharpness and contrast for my liking. Definitely, I've heard that Phantom LUTs are quite good. Phantom LUTs and Leeming LUTs, I think, do good S-Log3 LUTs. So I haven't used them myself, but yeah, I prefer to grade the S-Log manually. It takes longer, but it's actually quite satisfying as well. And you get that. For me, when you manually grade the S-Log, you get that more of that filmic look, sorry, because a lot of the LUTs bake in too much contrast, too much saturation, and they end up just looking like digital footage anyway. And I think what I'm going for is not a filmic look, but something in between. So something that has a nice bit of sharpness, but also kind of has that kind of organic look. So that's why I like to use a lot of film grain on my footage, just because it takes that digital edge off it a little bit. So yeah, when you're manually grading S-Log, you can kind of dial in that look you want, or if you want that more contrasty look, you can do that as well. But yeah, manually grading S-Log I think is the way forward. It takes longer, but I always find when I use a LUT that I wish I had more control. I know you can tweak the footage after the LUT, but in my mind, I think I'd rather have full control over the whole process. So how much saturation, how much contrast, etc. I hope that answers your question, Rowan. Everyone that's watching at the moment, like the stream. We've only got 2 likes at the moment, but we've got 6 people watching. Make sure you like, so this gets shown to more people on the YouTube algorithm, and we get more people joining us for the discussion and all that good stuff. Just seen the likes go up. Thank you very much. And drop your comments below. Let me know what you want to know about the A7S III, which I own, and the FX6. I think Arno is in the chat as well, and he's talking about the FX9. So we've got a few people here. It would be great if we could have someone that has ordered the FX6, so we can kind of have those 3 perspectives. Someone else who just liked the stream. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Jack Corthine, I recognize you from one of the Facebook groups. Hi, how you doing? I'm late to the party. So you've mentioned it. How are you accurately exposing to the right in S-Log3, especially in run and gun situations? Great question, Jack. So for S-Log3 run and gun, basically I did my A7S III, 5 things I love, 2 things I don't. Hope you've watched that. It's on the channel. But anyway, I was filming outside a lot. I was filming skies. I was kind of filming areas with lots of contrast. So city skyscrapers with kind of the sky in the background, the shadows. And when I'm kind of exposing to the right for S-Log3, all I do is just protect the highlights. So I don't think about how many stops I overexposed by. Some people say 2 stops. Some people say on the A7S III, it's not as much because it's more forgiving. Me personally, I just like to protect the highlights. So I set my zebras to 94 plus. 94 is the level that S-Log3 clips on the A7S III. So I set the zebras on my A7S III to 94 plus, and then just watch out for anything that goes into that level. So if I'm shooting a scene with like a bright sky and a dark building on it, then I just make sure that the sky isn't kind of showing up on the zebras. That'll just make sure that everything that I get the full dynamic range basically. And then in post, I can kind of pull those levels down and make sure kind of it has a more accurate exposure. Does that answer your question? If not, let me know. And Jack, how has your experience been shooting with the A7S III? I know you're quite active on the Facebook group. But yeah, let me know how you've got on with it. And drop a like on the stream if you haven't already. Share it with your friends. I'm just going to take a sip. Perfect. Glad it helped you, Jack. Yep. So if you're just joining, we're talking about the FX6 versus the FX6 versus the A7S III, and kind of where they sit in Sony's range. And to sum it up for people that are just joining, I'm basically saying that the A7S III and the FX6 largely have the same specs. And I think this is a good thing because you've seen it with Canon as well. They've got the C70 and the C300 Mark III. They both have similar specs, but obviously the cinema cameras have the ND filters. They've got the XLR inputs. They've got the better handling. They've got the top handle. Yeah, basically you're getting the same specs, but you're getting kind of you're getting the cinema camera experience, or you're getting kind of like the portability of a point and shoot. So I think it's actually a really good place to be because you know that whatever you get, you're getting the best specs available on a 4K camera, but it's kind of suited to your needs. So for me, I like the portability of the A7S III. So that's great. And then if you're getting the FX6, you're getting pretty much the same specs, but you're getting kind of like the XLRs, the variable ND, the top handle, the side handle, and you're getting everything that's great about a cinema camera, but you're not sacrificing on specs. So I think it's a really good place for cameras to be. And I think it's what we're going to see going forward. So we're going to see camera companies kind of committing to the same specs across the board and just differentiating on kind of the inputs the cameras have, the features in terms of the hardware, not in terms of the specs. So I think it's a good place to be at the moment. If you're just joining us, make sure you like the stream and share it with your friends. Drop your comments below. We're talking about the FX6 versus the A7S III, where the strengths are in both of them, and where kind of like the weaknesses are, and kind of who they might be for. And kind of going on to that, like who each camera might be for. I think the A7S III is for people like me that are kind of I've been doing kind of full-time videography for 2.5 years now. So basically I do kind of commercial client work. I do kind of like lifestyle, corporate work, a lot of interviews. Used to do events when events were happening, but now that's not really a thing. So it's for people like me that are kind of like one-man band most of the time. Sometimes I have a second shooter, but most of the time I'm shooting by myself. So I need a camera that has good autofocus. It has kind of the ability to plug a mic into there. You can get the K3M adapter on the top to get XLR inputs in there. So yeah, I think it's more like kind of like those videographers and kind of corporate filmmakers that are looking for something a bit more portable. Whereas I think the FX6 is more for kind of like mini documentary, short films, those kind of people that are looking for that kind of those XLR inputs, that professional time code in. So matching up cameras is a lot easier. Those are the two people I think that those cameras are for. But I'd be interested to know what you think in the comments. Just catching up. Rowan says, how have you found coming from a C200 to the A7S III? Yeah, mostly positive. I think in the balance, I prefer the A7S III a lot more just because it's got that kind of 4K 120 in there. It's got the incredible autofocus, which if you're just joining, I mentioned that I had a client shoot recently and I was shooting B-roll of like a family in their home. And I use autofocus 90% of the time, basically, because it's just so good and I could trust it. So that was a massive plus. The things I miss from the C200 are the ND filter and the XLR inputs. But in the balance, I can live without it on a camera that's basically a quarter of the size of the C200 and a lot lighter. Basically, when I was shooting on the C200, I had a job where I was shooting at a school, shooting B-roll all day with the C200 on a Crane 3S gimbal. And you can imagine the weight on that was just incredible. So I had the the C200 with the 18-35 on it, on the Crane 3S, which is a heavy gimbal, trying to hold that all day long, and my arms just wanted to drop off. Basically, it was not fun. And it was after that shoot that I said, okay, I'm definitely getting a lighter camera. Like it's great to have a cinema camera. Like if you've got that kind of controlled environment where you're on a set, or using it for kind of like short takes where you can kind of put it down, pick it up. But for me, sometimes I'm shooting B-roll, I'm shooting client videos all day. I'm on my feet all day. If you're carrying that weight all day, it's a lot, especially if you're using, like I said, the C200 on the gimbal. It's not fun. So that's basically where I kind of what made my decision. Basically, that's what led me to get the A7S III, and I'm happy. Jack again says, "How have you managed to pick up use E-mount lenses yet? I know you shot with the 24-70, which looks great. Do you mean have I got any more lenses? I've just got the Sigma 24-70 at the moment, which I'm shooting this on now. I think it's between 24 and 35 mil, something like 28, something like that. Yeah, I love this lens. It's my first E-mount camera. Rowan, who's actually in the comments, did lend me a 90mm macro, which I used on a client shoot. Which, yeah, the 90mm macro is mad. It looks so good. I used that as like a B camera, like a close up on the client's face, and it looked incredible. So good. So yeah, I've just got the 24-70 at the moment, but I think my next lens will be the 35mm 1.8. Just because at most of the time I'm shooting at 35mm when I'm shooting B-roll or even my to camera pieces. I love that 35mm look. You're not getting much distortion, but you can still kind of do kind of wide portrait shots or detail shots, but it's wide enough to kind of get a sense of an environment as well. So yeah, definitely want a 35mm lens, and that'll be my next purchase. Yeah, Jack said, yeah, one of you got any more lenses? No, just the Sigma 24-70 at the moment. Happy with it, but looking for a 35 1.8. Rowan says, why get the 1.8 Sony 35mm over the 1.4 Sigma? For me, I've just heard that the Sigma autofocus with the Sony system is not as good. Correct me if I'm wrong, if you own the lens, but yeah, I've heard that the Sigma autofocus with the Sony cameras is not as good. They have got a few lenses, the DG-DN lenses, that they're making native for E-mount. So they've released an 85mm with the Sigma, which is native, but the 1.4 I don't think is quite optimized for Sony's autofocus yet. So that's why I wanted to go for the Sony kind of the first party lens, the Sony 1.8 35mm. Jack says 35 1.8 will never leave your camera after. So light, optically great, and perfect for gimbals. Yeah, that's the idea. It's my favorite focal length to shoot on, so I can see myself sticking that on for B-roll shoots, and yeah, just leaving it on there. So Jack, how have you found using the 85 1.8? And what kind of stuff do you shoot, Jack? I think are you based in Surrey? I think I remember reading from the Facebook group. Let me know where you're from. Rowan says, I've heard that also, but there was a firmware update apparently. Rowan, do you mean that, because I know that Sigma released that dock where you can put the lenses in there and update the firmware? Is that what you mean? Let me know. I'm just going to take a sip of water. If you're just joining the stream, make sure you like it and share it with your friends so we can get more people here, get a discussion going. Anybody that's joining from the Facebook groups, the A7S III or FX6 Facebook groups, hi, welcome, and thanks for joining. Those groups are amazing. I've had a lot of fun kind of interacting with people over there. So it'd be great to have more people from Facebook over here so we can have that more immediate discussion rather than just kind of commenting on videos. So if you just joined, thanks for joining. Like the video and share it with your friends. Drop your comment below. What do you want to know about the A7S III? I can tell you a lot because I'm filming on it right now. Or the FX6. At the moment, we're going on rumors and kind of the hands-on that other people on YouTube have done. But I'll do your best to answer those questions. And I've got quite a few people in the comments that can answer your questions as well. Rowan says, on a Gerald and Dunn video, about the 35mm lenses. He said there was a firmware update which improved the autofocus. Interesting. I'll have to read up more about that. I'm not sure. Rowan says, am I right in saying that the 24-70 Sigma and the 85mm Sigma are the only ones optimized for Sony autofocus? I think so. I think it's the 24-70 and the 85, which because a lot of the Sigma lenses are kind of adapted from DSLR lenses, so they're kind of rehoused to work with Sony, to work with the L mount. Whereas those two, the 24-70 and the 85mm, are optimized to work with E mount. So yeah, those two Sigma lenses. Let me know if there's any more Sigma lenses that are optimized for E mount, but I think it's just those two. Jack says, I love the 35mm 1.8 Sony lens. I'm based in Kent and I predominantly shoot weddings. Shot a styled shoot with it, and A7S III, and the footage looks so good. Yeah, I've got no doubt. I've seen some of the sample footages on the Sony 1.8 35mm, and yeah, it just looks incredible. I think Brandon Lee did a great video about kind of the 35 1.8 Sony lens, but also kind of like the 35mm focal length in general. I think it's my favorite focal length, that or 50mm. I know it's kind of like a boring standard focal ranges, but they're my favorite just because they're so versatile. If you've got a 35mm or a 50mm lens, you can shoot most things. Like obviously the 50mm won't be as wide, which is why I kind of prefer that kind of 35mm look. Rob Sampson said, you mentioned renting the C300. Why didn't you go with the FX9 or Sony since you own an E-mount glass? No, I didn't rent the C300, mate. I used to own the C200, but I've used the C300 Mark II, not the C300 Mark III. I didn't go for the FX9 just because of the price. So the FX9 is well over £10,000 or dollars. So that kind of ruled it out for me. I wanted something that was something that I could get for, under $5,000 with the camera, the lens, and the media and the cage and everything that goes with it. I wanted everything for kind of like £5,000, £5,000, $5,000, everything in camera, lens, batteries, media, everything. If I went for the FX9, I was considering FX9 or C300 Mark III, C300 Mark III, but it was just the fact that they were over 10,000. And then once you factor in kind of the CF Express Type B cards on the C300 and all of the glass you need to get with it, the price just went up and it just wasn't worth it for me. So I noticed some new people have joined. Make sure you like the stream so more people can find out about it and we can have more people discussing and share with your friends. Mars Attacks 69, great name. 35 is mine. Its versatility makes it such a great choice. Very true. What 35mm lens do you have, Mars Attacks? Rob Sampson said, if you considered the FX9 C300 Mark III, why not the FX6 as opposed to the A7S III? So I got my A7S III before the FX6 was announced, Ralph, and that's why I went for the A7S III. If I was buying again today, I would probably, I don't know, it would be a lot harder. So I'd be in two minds about FX6 versus A7S III. Yeah, it's a tough choice. The FX6 is more expensive, so that kind of factors into it as well. Ralph says, will you return it? Will I return the A7S III? No. At the time of pandemic and lockdowns and all that, and we've got less money in our pockets. Let me know what kind of stuff you shoot, Ralph. It'd be interesting to know. Do you shoot corporate stuff, beauty stuff? Let me know in the comments below. But yeah, I shoot corporate stuff, lifestyle. Yeah, at the time of pandemic, I can't afford to trade in any equipment for other equipment and lose value and lose money and things like that. The A7S III is perfect for what I need it for. In the future, I might think about buying an FX6 or a cinema camera again. But right now, the A7S III is perfect. Ralph says, I shoot a bit of everything. Well, that's a good place to be. Having said that, I think I started to get a lot more business when I kind of explored a niche more, or a niche if you're in America. So I went into corporate as my niche. Um, but yeah, it's cool that you do everything. I think it means that you get experience in a number of different things, and it means that whatever client comes to you, you can kind of say, yeah, I've done that. I can do that. Absolutely. Ralph, are you planning to kind of get a bit more niche in the future, or are you happy shooting a bit of everything? Let me know. I'm just going to take a sip because I've been talking for a while. If you're just joining, make sure you like the stream and drop your comment below. Let me know if you have any questions about the A7S III, which I'm shooting on now, or if you have any questions about the FX6, which Sony have just announced and is up for pre-order, or any other questions about videography, filmmaking, content creation. Let me know. My set is actually being held together by masking, by gaffer's tape in some areas. My bounce has just kind of fallen over a little bit, so you might be getting less fill on this side of my face. If you're interested, the lighting setup I'm using is a 300D above me, shot through a large diffusion frame. So basically 300D with the reflector on, shot through a diffusion frame, and it's just basically offering a soft overhead light. And because I've got glasses, I need to avoid those reflections that you get when you're looking at lights. So that's something I always have to think about, unfortunately. If you don't have glasses, amazing, I'm jealous. But yeah, always thinking about those reflections. So I've just got the 300D through that diffusion fabric, and I've got a 5-in-1 reflector over here, just adding a little bit of fill. And I've shot the aperture f7 into that bounce just to kind of fill in the side of my face. I do have some aperture MCs, which I was going to put some kind of accent RGB light in the back, but because it was a bit of a last minute stream, I just kind of stuck with the basic lighting setup. But I'd like to make this regular, so comment below if you're enjoying this and would like to see more, and let me know what kind of discussions you'd like to have in the future. This is the first live stream I've done, and basically, yeah, I just wanted a more organic discussion between us because, community in filmmaking is so important, so important. We've all been there working as a one-man band, struggling with jobs, struggling to kind of make ends meet, thinking that our work's not good enough, etc. So just having a community, having people to talk to have your back, to say, hey, this works really good, or you could do this a bit better. So important. I mean, I've met some amazing filmmakers this year. I think the lockdown, the pandemic has kind of made people a little bit more aware that they do need that community. They do need that human interaction rather. I think it's really important. So anything that kind of emphasizes our filmmaking, content creation, videography community is really important. So that's what I'm trying to build here. I'm trying to build a community where we can all kind of meet, discuss about all the exciting tech ideas, filmmaking tips, like anything like that. It's an open forum. Ralph says, happy with having a mix of corporate and short film. FX6 will be pretty versatile. Can't wait. Oh, so Ralph, you've actually pre-ordered it. Nice one, mate. I'm jealous. You'll have to let us know how it is when it arrives. I'll be doing these live streams every week, hopefully. So yeah, come back on the live stream when you get the FX6, and we'd love to hear your experiences with it, basically. Jack says, what is in your essential kit, Jack? So I'm actually planning a video on the number one thing you should buy. The first thing you should buy as a videographer or filmmaker, and it's 100% a 5-in-1 reflector. That is always in my bag. It's always in my kit. I use it on almost every shoot I do. 5-in-1 reflector is incredible. So good, so good, so good. I can't emphasize it enough. That thing can do anything. So you can use it as a bounce light, as I'm doing now, to kind of fill in your talent or fill in an object, bouncing sunlight off it. You can use the gold side to add like a nice warm glow to something. You can have the silver side to, have a stronger reflection, or you can use the black side as like a flag to kind of to block off light. The 5-in-1 reflector is my number one essential piece of equipment, and it's so cheap. So any new filmmakers, videographers, content creators that are watching, and you're wondering the first thing you should buy, because it's so overwhelming. There's so many different things that you're told you need to get. You need to get the camera, you need to get the lenses, you need to get the lighting, you need to get the microphones, the everything. It can be really overwhelming, but yeah, if I'm going to say one thing you should buy, it's going to be the 5-in-1 reflector. That thing is essential. So that's in my essentials kit. This mic is in my essentials kit because you can use it like I'm using now as like a USB mic, or you can use it like boomed over talent as an interview mic. You can use it as like a on-camera mic to get kind of like run and gun interviews. It's such a great mic. It's the Rode Video Mic NTG. Very versatile. Great mic. If you're just joining, like the stream and share it with your friends so we can get more people on the discussion, more people interacting and sharing advice and guidance. Also, if you're just joining, make sure that you leave your comment below. Ask your questions about filmmaking, videography, A7S III, FX6, FX9, anything you want to know, or any unique perspectives you want to bring to the table. Drop it in the comments below. If you're just joining, we've talked about kind of like how the FX6 and the A7S III are very similar. They've got the similar specs. They've basically got the same specs, to be honest. You're getting the 4K 120. You're getting kind of the great autofocus, the eye autofocus, and they're kind of differing on the inputs that you get. So like the XLR, the SDI input, the timecode in, and that's kind of like differentiating factor now. So it really depends on like what kind of stuff you shoot, what your budget is. The A7S III is cheaper, which is something to consider as well. Rowan says, just replying to Jack's comment. Jack says, great suggestions. Thank you, Jack. Jack, what is in your essentials kit? And yeah, in the chat, like what is your number one essential piece of gear to have as a new filmmaker? Let me know in the comments below. I'll be interesting because everybody's got a different favorite piece of gear, a different thing that they can't leave home without. So let me know what yours is below and we'll get into it. Also, if you're just joining, drop a comment below and tell us where you're from. I know we've got a few people from the UK here representing, but do we have anyone over in the US? Anyone from anywhere else in the world? Jack says an essential piece of kit for him is an air blower. So yeah, definitely. Just to clean the dust off your sensor and kind of get all those little bits of, you look at your camera up close sometimes and you're like, how did it get so dirty? How did it get so dusty? So yeah, having an air blower or kind of like one of those little brushes to clean it off is absolutely essential. Jack, that's a great point. Yeah, the air blower, and they're also very cheap. So just like a little kind of little air blower thing you can get from Amazon. You can get them in kits where they have like the lens cleaning wipes, the sensor cleaning swabs, the little brushes. They've got everything in a kit, and it's like £10, $10. So yeah, essential stuff. Thank you, Jack. Anybody else? What is your essential piece of kit that you can't leave home without? Let me know in the comments below. Oh, Ralph, you're from Quebec in Canada. Hi, welcome. Good to have someone from over the pond. How are things going for you in Canada? So Rowan said, interesting take. The number one essential piece of gear other than that is, the number one essential piece of gear is a camera with a phone. Sorry. The number one piece of gear is a phone with a camera. But other than that, experimentation and awe. Getting spiritual now, Rowan. Anything that helps fuel inspiration. Absolutely. Ralph said it's snowing in Quebec at the moment. Oh, okay. Isn't it always snowing in Canada? I seem to see, whenever I see kind of stuff on YouTube, all the Canadian YouTubers, it's always snowing, which I kind of think is quite nice actually, because in the UK here, we never have really bright weather, and we never have kind of snow where you can kind of like go out and have fun and and if you've got a family, play with your family, etc. In the UK, we've just got kind of rain and grey skies, so it's I kind of miss having snow or kind of extreme hot weather sometimes. that's why kind of the fact that we can't go on holiday at the moment because of this whole situation makes it very difficult. Very difficult. Ralph said you got first snow in Canada. Oh, in Quebec. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, Ralph, that's the UK. We've got miserable weather. That's why kind of British people always talk about weather. Like it's like a cliche here that British people, like when they meet each other, they always ask about the weather because it's always miserable most of the time. But yeah, if you're just joining, make sure you like the stream. We've got 9 people watching, but only 5 likes. Let's help fix that. Let's get the likes up. Ralph said, have you spoken to anybody who tried the FX6? No, I haven't. There's been a few people on the Facebook groups that have pre-ordered them, but they haven't got them yet. So I think when people get them, they'll kind of be trying them out. It'll be interesting to hear their thoughts on that. So we've been going for nearly an hour now. Drop your final comments below, and if not, we're going to end the stream soon. Thank you so much for joining me in my first stream. It's been a bit sketchy. We've got some basic lighting, but hopefully it's been okay, and it's been great to discuss everything camera related with you guys. Thank you so much for joining. Yeah, any final comments, drop them below, and if not, then I'll see you next week. Hopefully we're going to make this a weekly thing. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to see in the future. Yeah, and hope you're all good wherever you are in the world. We've got someone from Canada, a few people in the UK, I think someone from America as well. So good to see that there's a international representation here. Any final comments, let me know. We're talking about the FX6 and the A7S III, but also generally like cameras, filmmaking, videography, all those lovely things. And it's going to be a weekly thing. So make sure you're subscribed. If you're watching now and you're not subscribed, fix that now, because I'm going to be doing a lot of exciting content about I've done a video on the FX6. I've done one about the A7S III. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss anything. And if you have any questions or like stuff you'd like to see in the future, drop that in the comments as well. We're up to 7 likes now. Thank you very much. Let's try and get to 10. 3 more. If people are watching and haven't liked, make sure you like the video so we can get more people watching. Jack says, what's the one thing other than the beautiful electronic ND that you'd like to see on the A7S III that is in the FX6? Mine would be the noise control capabilities. Yeah, so I think Jack's talking about the ability on the FX6 to... The FX6 has 3 levels of noise reduction. So the A7S III, you can't turn the noise reduction off, which is annoying because basically the noise reduction on the A7S III is quite aggressive. So technically you can shoot at high ISOs, but unless you're shooting at the base ISOs, so in S-Log3, the second base ISO is 12,800, and that's at the point where it kind of cleans up a little bit. But if you kind of go below that or above that, it looks really noisy, and that's with Sony's noise reduction. So the FX6 has the option to either switch the noise reduction off or have it on low, mid, or high, which basically means that kind of you can capture those high ISO footage and then clean it up with something that's a bit more capable, like Neat Video or like any kind of post noise reduction. I think Neat Video is the best. That's the one that I use. But yeah, the FX is just being able to kind of dial in that noise reduction to the level that you want. And if you don't want any noise reduction, turn it off and add it in post. And yeah, post noise reduction with stuff like Neat Video looks amazing. It looks incredible. It cleans up nicely. You retain some of the sharpness. Fantastic. Yeah, if you're just joining us, let me know if you have any questions about the A7S III or the FX6 or any general filmmaking, videography, tips, tricks. Let me know in the comments below. We've also touched on what is your number one essential piece of gear. So someone has said that kind of a blower to clean the sensor. I've said my number one essential piece of gear is a 5-in-1 reflector, just because it's so versatile. If you have a favorite bit of kit, drop it in the comments below. And if not, we're going to be clocking off soon, but I don't think there's any more comments. So yeah, thank you so much for joining the first stream. This has been really nice to kind of sit with you and discuss all of the day's news, the tech, the gear. Anything that kind of comes up, we're going to discuss on these things. They're going to be weekly, hopefully, if time permits. So yeah, anything you'd like to see in the future, drop it in the comments below. And thank you so much for joining. It's been amazing. Take care. Goodbye.